I was just cause I just got back from arraignment, and I'm like, all I heard was murder, and I'm just like, damn, like that was that.
Before the headlines, before the snitch jokes, and before the internet turned him into a meme, 6ix9ine faced one reality alone: jail. No security, no special treatment, no music. In this clip, he explains what his first night behind bars were really like and why they changed the way he saw everything. On November 18, 2018, federal agents arrested Daniel Hernandez along with several members of the 9 Trey Gangsta Bloods, including his former manager, Cafano Shotty Jordan. He was charged with racketeering, conspiracy, firearms offenses, drug distribution, and conspiracy to commit murder tied to incidents such as a shooting at the Barclays Center, an armed robbery near Times Square, and alleged orders to carry out hits on rivals. Prosecutors claimed Hernandez used the gang for protection while helping fund their operations, exposing him to a potential life sentence with a minimum of 47 years. The arrest took place around 6 p.m., and the timing was deliberate. FBI wiretaps had uncovered gang members discussing plans to super violate him, gang slang for extreme retaliation, possibly murder, after he publicly fired his crew on Instagram. Former allies had turned against him, and authorities knew his life was at risk. At his arraignment on November 19, 2018, bail was denied despite offers exceeding $1 million, with prosecutors pointing to his own social media posts as evidence of glorifying violence. Hernandez pleaded not guilty, while his attorney, Lance Lazaro, argued the case was overcharged and based on hearsay, insisting Hernandez was not a real gang member but an artist using a gang image to sell music. Then came the placement that shocked everyone. Hernandez was initially placed in general population at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a federal jail notorious for its harsh and dangerous conditions. The U.S. Justice Department has described MDC as a facility that houses extremely violent and high-risk inmates, plagued by chronic overcrowding, understaffing, mold, and frequent outbreaks of violence. The decision stunned many, especially since federal authorities had placed Hernandez in protective custody before his arrest due to credible threats on his life. His attorney, Lance Lazaro, openly questioned the move, arguing it directly contradicted those earlier safety measures and exposed Hernandez to serious risk because of his celebrity status and gang associations. Inside MDC, the environment made his first days overwhelming, with inmates subjected to near-constant lockdowns, deteriorating facilities, and relentless noise. Prison experts, including consultant Sam Mangel, have labeled MDC one of the most dangerous federal detention centers, with some judges even refusing to send defendants there. Reports also suggested Hernandez immediately faced tension and confrontations with other inmates, including members of rival gangs like the Crips. These threats weren't abstract, they were real, immediate, and potentially fatal. Yet what Hernandez experienced during his very first night behind bars was not what most people expected, a moment he would later describe in interviews as a turning point that stayed with him long after.
I locked up at 6 o'clock, right? Rachel, I got locked up at 6 o'clock. That night, I watched the movie on like a Fed phone. Like they gave me like an iPad or whatever, and they said just lay on the rug like and watch a movie. I watched Lone Survivor.
The contrast between perception and reality that first night was striking. While the media focused on death threats and the danger of his placement, Hernandez was sitting in his cell watching a war movie on an iPad. The moment carried a dark irony and revealed how he processed the situation, not frozen by fear, but quietly assessing what came next. That brief sense of detachment didn't last long. The following day pulled him back into reality when he stood at his arraignment and heard the full weight of the charges read aloud.
Last night, I was just like, I'm trying to think about how that night went. No, that night I was like, you know what I'm trying to say? I'm not, cause I just got back from arraignment, and I'm like, all I heard was murder, and I'm just like, damn, like that was that.
The gravity of the charges finally sank in: murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, firearms offenses. These weren't minor allegations. They were the kind of charges that could lock him away for life. But even in that moment, Hernandez's mindset began to shift quickly.
No, they were all like older, like 60, 50. So no, I was in a jail full of rats. Everybody was snitches. Like the jail I was in, everybody snitched. I was like a rat jail.
His lawyer stressed that Hernandez never personally requested protective custody, instead focusing on keeping his family safe amid the chaos. That distinction mattered. He wasn't begging for protection or acting out of fear. His concern was directed outward, not inward. The threats against him didn't begin in jail. They started earlier, after he distanced himself from the 9 Trey gangster bloods. In October 2018, following a plea violation hearing where he avoided incarceration, a celebratory dinner turned violent when a shootout broke out between Shotty's crew and his label security. FBI wiretaps later captured gang leaders, including Mel Murder and Shotty, discussing authorization of hits with statements like, "He don't got nothing to lose no more." Although Hernandez declined offers of FBI protection, the escalating risk ultimately contributed to his arrest as a safety measure. Once inside jail, the perception that he might cooperate only intensified the danger from gang-affiliated inmates. Even people close to him, such as associates known as TR3Y Drew and Wizard, reportedly feared retaliation after he fired his crew, choosing to isolate themselves. All of it highlighted just how serious the threats were during his earliest days in custody. Yet when Hernandez later spoke about his time inside, he described an experience that sounded very different from what the outside world expected.
Honest, I thought like it was gonna be a shower, like, and everybody showered. But when I first got to jail, I was in
rat jail.
I was in a rat jail, but it was protective custody jail, like protective custody unit. Like it was on like older guys in my pod, and then like the jails were like covered off, like it was.
This revelation shifted the story entirely. Hernandez's time in general population wasn't as perilous as it had been portrayed. The unit was largely made up of cooperators, informants, and older inmates. The actual threat level was far lower than the media suggested. Shortly after his arrival, on November 26, 2018, he was transferred from MDC's general population to a private facility in Queens for his safety, following bail denial and reports of prisoner altercations. This transfer wasn't something Hernandez requested. Federal officials made the call. The environment he described was a stark contrast to the hellish image the public had imagined. Instead of constantly fighting for his life or watching his back, he spent hours on the phone, speaking with his girlfriend and trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in an abnormal situation. Even the physical setup of protective custody was completely different, offering a level of security and stability that few expected.
Buy your own soap from commissary, and it's like you set your pin. It's like a machine,
right?
And then I would just call my business manager, and I'm like, "Yo,
wire $100 grand."
No, it was like $100 every day because I didn't trust.
He deposited money in small daily increments, carefully managing his resources in an environment where trust was hard to come by. Even the food came as a surprise.
They even have like mofongo and all that.
No, they have like it's pretty good though.
Burritos,
like seasoned food. Like
bro, Yo, how do I get locked?
The interviewer's reaction highlighted the unexpected nature of Hernandez's account. The facility he described sounded almost comfortable compared to the usual horror stories of federal detention, but that comfort came with context. Hernandez was clear. His experience was not typical. He was a cooperator, and the federal system had a vested interest in keeping him alive, healthy, and willing to testify. The conditions he enjoyed were the direct result of his corporation deal, a stark contrast to the rest of MDC. When the conversation shifted to Jeffrey Epstein, Hernandez was quick to draw distinctions. The Manhattan Correctional Center, where Epstein died, was a federal equivalent of Rikers Island, dangerous, overcrowded, and poorly maintained. Hernandez understood the difference between that facility and the protective unit where he was housed. His ability to analyze the prison system from within demonstrated his awareness. He knew where he was, why he was there, and how much worse it could have been. His time in protective custody was largely uneventful. There were no major incidents, attacks, or confrontations. He served his sentence, completed community service, and paid over $236,000 in restitution, without the violence many had expected. In interviews after his 2019 release, accelerated due to his cooperation and COVID-19 risks from asthma, he consistently reflected on this period. Outlets like Vlad TV and Billboard reported him downplaying the 2018 intensity, noting that despite his snitch status, no confrontations occurred. In a 2020 Billboard interview, he described a newfound fearlessness post-jail, viewing the experience as a life lesson. He also criticized rap's hypocrisy on snitching, pointing to artists like 21 Savage, Gunna, and T.I., whose similar actions were often overlooked. The protective custody setup was ultimately a strategic choice by federal authorities. Hernandez needed to survive to testify against the 9 Trey gangster bloods, a trial that led to multiple convictions, including his former manager, Shotty. His testimony was crucial, and his safety was a priority. Beyond strategy, however, the environment also revealed the federal system's approach to high-profile cooperators, isolated, protected, and provided with enough comfort to ensure cooperation. The horror stories of general population didn't apply to Hernandez. What set his experience apart from pure victimhood was his mindset. Throughout his incarceration and in later interviews, he consistently framed himself as guided by faith rather than fear. Post-release, he spoke about his time in prison with defiance and optimism, noting that despite his snitch label, he faced no confrontations, crediting a calm, faith-driven approach. When you walk with the Almighty, you walk confidently, no fear, he told interviewers, presenting his incarceration as a test of faith rather than a nightmare. This religious perspective allowed him to construct a narrative that went beyond the street code he had broken. In hip-hop culture, cooperating with law enforcement is seen as the ultimate betrayal. Informants are ostracized, threatened, and sometimes killed. Hernandez experienced these pressures but refused to embrace the shame typically associated with being a snitch. He viewed prison as a temporary setback, prioritizing his family's safety above all else, and stated he would cooperate with authorities again if it ensured their protection. From the very first night, his approach was calculated. Watching Lone Survivor on his first night, a film depicting Navy SEALs facing impossible odds in Afghanistan, Hernandez immediately reflected on the stakes. The movie's pivotal choice, not killing civilians who discover them, leading to ambush, resonated with him. Choices of consequences, and survival demands adaptation to IN practice. This meant he didn't spend his days plotting revenge or maintaining gang ties. Instead, he focused on phone calls with loved ones, managing a commissary account, and keeping a structured routine to preserve his sanity. His lack of fear was deliberate, not bravado. Fear in prison makes people vulnerable. It invites predators. By projecting confidence and faith, Hernandez created a psychological barrier to complement the physical protections of his custody. Even his lawyer's statement that Hernandez never personally requested protective custody reinforced this narrative. It allowed him to claim he wasn't afraid, didn't need special treatment, and that any accommodations were the system's decision, not his own. From the start, his incarceration was approached as a strategic challenge, not a punishment to be endured. Whether or not Hernandez's portrayal was entirely accurate, the narrative worked in his favor. It preserved a sense of dignity in a situation designed to strip it away. In interviews, he consistently emphasized his safety and composure. Never had no problems. Thank God, he told Vlad TV, crediting divine intervention rather than federal protection. The religious framing ran throughout his public statements, but beneath it lay a sharper, strategic reality. Hernandez understood power. His value to federal prosecutors came from his willingness to testify. As long as he remained cooperative, the system had an interest in keeping him safe. His cooperation was transactional, and he leveraged it fully. The implications went beyond personal survival. Hernandez challenged the street code publicly, pointing out its hypocrisy. He named artists like 21 Savage, Gunna, and T.I. for similar behaviors that were conveniently overlooked. This wasn't defensive deflection, it was an offensive strategy. By undermining the moral authority of those who condemned him, he weakened their criticisms. In a 2025 Vlad TV interview, he reflected on how early arrests hardened him, focusing on survival over regret. He spoke of being arrested at 17 for drug sales and learning to navigate systems built to crush young men like him. Prison wasn't new. It was an escalation of experiences he had already processed. His assertion that he would cooperate again every time if it meant protecting his family with a radical stance, rejecting street loyalty in favor of a new code. Family first, survival first, consequences be damned. This mindset was clear in how he approached his 2024 and 2026 incarcerations. When he surrendered at MDC Brooklyn on January 6, 2026, he arrived in a luxury van accompanied by streamer Adam Ross and content creator Steve Wildoit, live streaming the entire event. They sang Justin Bieber's Baby before his entry. This was not the behavior of someone traumatized by prison. It was someone who had already made peace with it. Hernandez expressed confidence in interviews, downplaying past jail experiences as largely uneventful. He even recorded a song, First Day In, with Ross and Cuffamatically, addressing incarceration while dissing rivals. His spokesperson highlighted self-improvement goals, including physical training, health focus, and content planning. The resilience narrative he built served multiple purposes, preserving his image, reinforcing his faith and strategy, and turning what could have been vulnerability into power.